All right, so welcome. It is Jennifer Britton of Potentials Realized and GroupCoachingEssentials.com, and I want to welcome you to our 13th annual year-end group and team programs call. This is an annual tradition, something I started back in 2004 in the first year of my business. And in the last 12, 13 years, we've moved from phone only to our current platform of Zoom. If you haven't met me before, I am the founder of Potentials Realized. I'm also the author of Effective Group Coaching and From One to Many, Best Practices for Team and Group Coaching. I'm also the host of a year-long program, group coaching program for coaches that's called the Learning Lab and Design Studio. And it's an experimental, come, get coached, create. So I should really call it a creative experimental space where coaches, facilitators, and trainers come together to focus on all things groups and teams, and also by design, business development. So here's the roadmap for our short call today. It's really an opportunity to reconnect and say, hey, how have you been doing? What have you been focusing on as you've been moving forward with your work? I'm going to take a look back at some of the 2016 trends, some of the things that have shaped our world as it relates to group and team programs, and also take a look forward at some of the opportunities. It is year end, and this is always a bittersweet time where we can really take a look at what have we been working on and what has been making impact in very different ways. So as is part and parcel of all of my work, I really hope that today's call you'll look at through the lens of what's useful for you, what might you tweak, and what do you definitely want to carry forward in your own work. This has been an exciting year for me on a number of different levels. Last month in October, or late October, I was given a Prism Award for some of the coaching culture work I've been doing in the healthcare sector. So we were awarded this, myself and my client, who is now I can name, the Scarborough Hospital, for some work that we did back in 2015, where I worked with their organization to develop a training program, a coaching and mentoring skills training program for more than 120 of their leaders. Those leaders have taken the coaching conversation out into their teams and into individual conversations, and it's really exciting to see how that conversation is changing the way teams operate, etc. Another big highlight of my year has been doing some real-time coaching, and this is what I get really excited about. With real-time coaching, what I mean is it is an opportunity to just be coaching in the moment. And there have been a couple of engagements this year where I have been coaching real time. So I would say that it was probably one of the most, it was a series of the most powerful coaching that I've seen in a while. As many of you know, I do a lot of virtual coaching, and that's wonderful. But we show up, we're in conversation in a very virtual space. And when you're able to be on the ground with a team, basically I was embedded with a couple of teams for a couple of weeks. Very, very amazing to see how change happens, feedback loops happen, and new behaviors happen while you are there in the moment. Now, I've continued with a lot of our programming. This year we continued with more than a dozen group coaching essentials groups from the public realm. We also did some work with some great professionals in Australia, so hi to you as you are enjoying summer now. And also did a lot of programming in organizations, whether it was coaching skills training or facilitation skills training. I continue to expand or leverage my work as a facilitator with corporate organizations and also in the realm of virtual facilitation training. And that really shadows or mirrors the continued expansion of virtual programming I have in my world of work. Last month, November 2016, I started writing a new book. It's now past its first draft form. That book will be coming out in the new year, later on in 2017, I should say. And the focus is really all about virtual conversations. So those were some of the things that I think were really exciting for myself, for Potentials Realized. It was wonderful to really receive a peer recognition of the work that I've done. A lot of people say, oh, you've made tremendous impact, but I have to say that, you know, receiving the Prism Award was really one of the highlights of my career over the last 12 years in terms of recognition of excellence in coaching. That's what the Prism Award stands for. And as many of you know through my writing, I really want to take a stand around excellence in our profession, but it's always nice to be acknowledged. It's more than nice. It's really a privilege to be acknowledged by peers in terms of the work that I've done and the results that have come out of that. So I want to take you through some of the sort of trends, things that have shaped our world as it relates to groups and teams this year. And I'm going to go through these one at a time, starting with individualization. Just-in-time support. Want to talk about this expansion of the virtual space. Talk a little bit about some of the science that we continue to see swirling around us. Talk some about team coaching and the importance of really having a variety of modalities to build upon. And then talking about links to other learning supports. So individualization, again, we live in an era where individualization is so shaping our worlds. It shapes how and what we see on our timelines. It shapes what shows up on our Twitter feed. And I think there's a pro side to this in terms of like we really want to customize what people want, but we also want to be aware of what we're not noticing. So in the spirit of coaching, the first question I want to ask you to think about is what do your clients really, 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 really want? What are you hearing from them? What are those things that they are putting their attention around, focusing on right this moment? And I think that can create some real insights for us around individualization. What are the things that we have been doing? What are the things you want? And think for yourself how that is framing and focusing your attention. This year, it's been really interesting for me. This time last year, I was in the process of launching the Learning Lab and Design Studio, which has been a year-long journey of creating new content, creating additional resources for the members of the Learning Lab and Design Studio. It's also been the first time that I've had a year-long group, and that has had its pluses and minuses. What I've noticed is that committing for a year is a long time. And that was one of the reasons why I led with this idea of individualization. What do people want? How do we shape and create need that represents what people do want? The flip side, or the plus side of the Learning Lab and Design Studio has been people can go in, there's a whole resource portal of past videos that I've done, past audios that are only available at the Learning Lab and Design Studio. They're not available to the regular public or to even people in other programs that I run. So we go a lot deeper into things, and people can pick and choose as they want. So what I love about individualization is there are so many different forums or platforms we can be using now that help us in this framework. Now, we also operate and live in the Uber era. That's a term I've been seeing a lot more as I've been reading and writing in these last couple of months. So it points to me to this idea of needing just-in-time support. What does just-in-time support mean for your clients? Does it mean being available the day of a big presentation? Does it mean being on site the day of a big process? Really think about how do your clients really, really want support? Not the what, but the how. And I think this idea of just-in-time support continues to shape and modify how we approach our work as coaches. I've been very excited, of course, with the expansion of the virtual space. And in 2016, have transitioned a lot of my courses from phone-based over to Zoom. So as I was mentioning earlier today on the Learning Lab and Design Studio, we've moved pretty much a variety of, everything was pure phone over to Zoom. About 85% of my group programs are now here on Zoom. It's wonderful in terms of interactivity, the ability for people to connect with each other. The downside is, though, it's a different set of energy. And it's been interesting to notice how I've enjoyed it at times and how towards the end of the week, I find it's very tiring to be on Zoom, be video streaming all the time. But it really has led to the benefit of live streaming. And I can't underestimate or overemphasize the importance of the visual connection that people get in a group with each other. I've noticed a whole new layer of connectivity and trust that's emerging within the groups that I work with who are meeting on Zoom versus the phone. It's happening, that bonding is happening so much faster. So think about what makes sense for your world. The beautiful thing with Zoom is, number one, It's a lot more stable for many, many callers than even Skype. 2, we can see each other like this, where you would normally see 4 people on the sidebar. And or you could also have people just coming on and being together. So it's almost like the Hollywood squares where you see people's faces and you connect with them that way. Now, from a live streaming perspective, it is really fascinating how we can also be doing things in our office. So what you see behind me here is, of course, just a flip chart. It does allow me to do a lot more work, whiteboards, etc., that I couldn't do before within a phone-based environment only. So there's options here and opportunities. Earlier this fall, I had a number of client engagements where I had to fit in around group program calls that I was running. The nice thing about Zoom is that I could be in downtown Toronto. I found a couple of parks where I was able to plug in, log in on my phone using their mobile app, and also log in on my laptop where I was sharing my own phone's Wi-Fi to actually stream the call. So it allows you to be mobile, truly, truly mobile. So I think this is expanding not only how we are leading calls, but how our participants are experiencing calls. And depending on who your clients are, really think about how you're expanding your work into the virtual space. This is really the focus of my new book that will come out next year. Really, how do we create engaging and effective virtual conversations? Now, part of, I think, the biggest question mark for a lot of coaches, whether you've been in business for 1 year or 13 years, is how do I continue to expand my network? So things like Facebook Live and Periscope have really taken over the ability for people, coaches, to reach out and be in front of their groups. Last year at this time, you might recall, I was doing a series of blabs, and the blabs were a live streaming of me in action, sort of just doing things here in my office. I haven't personally jumped onto the Periscope or Facebook Live vehicles, but they are now there. Interestingly enough, Blab was closed down about 3 or 4 months ago just because they were developing a new app. So think about yourself, your clients, virtual space. Is your work virtual? Is it not? It may not be, but just notice that the realm is changing dramatically. Now, many of you are more experts in this than I am. Scientific grounding. This to me brings me back to my roots. I did my undergraduate in science, in psychology, and looking at how we can actually use things like neuroscience, intelligence, and continued research. And the research continues to grow and evolve so many ways. I think we've had some people drop in. There's Dee Dee, it's being recorded. So if you don't want to be on, you can just stop your video. Thank you for joining me. Again, it's one of those drop-in days. And I'm just talking about some of the trends that we saw last year or over this past year. So welcome to you. Do you want to say a quick hi, which will be recorded, or do you want to just sit back and listen?
Well, can I do both? I say hello to you. It's good to see your face. And then I'll sit back and listen. How's that?
Sounds good. And, I've got a little bit of a presentation. I'm going through some of the top trends. We'll see if others drop in. It's an unusual time for me. Normally, I try to do these an hour later, but welcome to you, Dee Dee. Feel free to stop your video if you can remember how to do that. Usually bottom corner, stop video, sit back, relax. I've just shared a few of the trends of this year, including virtualization, including individualization, and just in time. So I was saying, with the Uber era, with things like that, it's really, I think, again, creating a wonderful opportunity for coaching. A lot of people want these micro moments where they can be focusing on themselves. For ourselves, under this era of science, the continued weaving of science with coaching, it's such an exciting time to be looking at all the multiple intelligences. I know for many alumni, you do work in EI. Of course, this year in the coaching world, there was all about conversational intelligence. There are just so many intelligences we can be leveraging, and intelligence would show up in our room or on our phone line. So I would encourage you, if you haven't been doing any continued improvement in this area, to just be noticing, just with the continued research and your own work, what is making sense, how do you want to keep growing your knowledge base as well? Now, I think this year, 2016, was really an era of team coaching. And a few months ago, I was part of a virtual panel over in, the conference was actually taking place in New York City. But there were 7 or 8 of us that were panelists calling in from all over the world. So I was able to join other quote-unquote thought leaders and authors, people like Peter Hawkins, David Clutterbuck, Marita Frijan, Phil Sondal, DJ Mitch, and Ruth Wagerman. And together we were a panel of 8 talking about the history, the roots of team coaching, where we see it now, and where we see it going. It was really a dynamic conversation. And we all, as you might appreciate, bring very different perspectives. Some of the professionals on the call were authors like myself. Others, like myself, were practitioners. So if you have not yet found that or heard about this link, luckily they were able to make it available. And it's now on YouTube. It's about an 85 to 90 minute panel presentation, virtual panel presentation that we did for this Columbia University coaching conference this fall. And it's well worth it. I think if you're interested in taking team coaching to your world, it talks about practicalities, it talks about the nuances, it talks about the history. So a quick way, I've linked to it from our Facebook page, Effective Group Coaching, but another quick way to go is just to Google it on YouTube. And the moderator who pulled us all together, of course, was Krister Lowe, who some of you may know through the Team Coaching Podcast Zone. And if you haven't checked out Krister's Team Coaching Podcast Zone, definitely something to check out. Well worth it. He is on a journey to do more than 100, or maybe just 100. I think he'll keep going after 100, I hope. But he's on his way to about 70 of his interviews around team coaching. And I was interviewed early last year, 2015, and I think he's at about 70 now. So team coaching really coming into its own in many areas. Again, I think this is really dependent on where you are in the world, whether people are talking about team coaching or not. We still don't have a lot of clarity around simple definitions because the range of what falls under this category continues to be very, very large. So I flagged this as one of the themes, sort of one of the trends. I just continue to meet so many more coaches that are bringing their conversations not only from the one-on-one conversation, but into the team realm, which means that we're often working with systems. So we're no longer just leveraging the same skill set. We're really looking at the systems piece. And that sort of brings me to this next point, which I usually say, it's like this is not a new slide for many people, but I think, again, 2016 has highlighted the need or the linkage to other modalities. I think to be masterful in our work, whether we're standing purely in the stance of capital C coach or facilitator, there are so many other modalities, vehicles to get the word out. I talked earlier in this presentation on, just looking at the explosion of the web, whether we're doing webinars, whether we're doing live streaming, whether we're hosting really group coaching conversations on the phone, or we're still doing things in person, taking those deep, deep dives that only we can do in the retreat world, for example. So there's lots of different options for us. And as coaches, I think we want to keep looking at what are the needs of our clients? Where are we being called forward? What does it mean to integrate and weave together coaching approaches and or other modalities? I was talking a little earlier today at the Learning Lab and Design Studio about how important it is to weave our skills, whatever that skill set might look like. And what I get really excited about as someone who is trained multidisciplinary is, things are really coming together at this moment. Like we are needing to leverage skills and conversational abilities in so many different ways. So that's the sort of the lay of the land for 2016. Again, virtualization, individualization, looking at, being the best coach you can be in service to others. I think there are some things that have been bubbling up over the year. And while I'm calling these 27 possibilities, these may be things that you're seeing already in your work. Certainly they've been evolving, and it's sort of fun that Dee Dee's with me here today, because one of them, I think Dee Dee got to experience with me, which was some some hacks. So, we are living in not only in an Uber era, but we are really operating in a lot of organizations where time is super, super limited. So one of the things that's been happening in the IT realm in the last couple of years, not only with Agile, but they've been doing a lot of hacks, which are these massive coding events where coders come together, they just do this blitz and they just do it together and come out with some really amazing things. The hackathon, they call them often hackathons. This is now being translated into some new areas. There are now industry-wide, I guess you would call it like career festivals. I can't think of even the old term we used to call it, but they're like industry-wide career hackathons where job applicants are sort of like paired in this very fast way with potential employers. And so you bring people together, you put them in a room, you see what you can create, and it's pretty amazing. Whether it's a new job or new ideas, it's almost like this learning lab in just complete steroids. So back in July, I did a design hack where I think we had about 30 to 45 minutes, and we went through a very, very, very quick process of designing out the skeleton of a program. It really lit my fire. I was seeing how smoothly it flowed. And since July, I've done a number of different hacks with individual clients, with group clients. It's often been in the span of, program design, but there's something very powerful about this idea of hack, get in, do it, focus deeply, and also bring people together so that you have some of that collaborative space. So hacks are one thing, and then there's another bit of an iteration. And again, as a practitioner, I sort of hold these together. But last month, here at the Learning Lab and Design Studio, or at the Learning Lab and Design Studio, I did something I called a vision sprint. So it was a little different than the hack, but it was time-bound. We had 45 minutes, and what I took the group through was just a very quick visioning exercise. So it was a sprint. Once again, I wasn't quite sure how far we'd get, but what actually showed up was it was amazing. I had been reading about Google's experience on sprints, where it's sort of rapid prototyping. You bring people together, you're in a room, you have a facilitated process, which gets the creative juices really super, super flowing, and then let teams go to just create. And that was truly this idea of the vision sprint. Create a space where you could think, focus, and let it flow. And with a number of experiences now in the virtual realm, I'm really becoming very intrigued and thinking about seriously how I'm going to be bringing in more sprints and hacks into my virtual work with teams and also individuals in the new year. So keep your eyes and ears open. I put this as a possibility. What I think I do notice all the time with most of my clients, my corporate clients for coaching, is they are so time compressed right now. And this sort of links back to some of the work that I won the Prism Award around, which was how did we in 2015 take leaders through some coaching skills training and support them in creating coaching conversations that fit a hospital-based environment. So as you can appreciate, if you are a nurse, if you are a doctor, if you are a clinician of any kind, you need to have coaching conversations, but it may not be sitting down across the table for an hour conversation at a time. We still want to use the same core competencies and the same process of helping people identify their goals and their options and their actions and their awareness, but we need to do this in a compressed amount of time. And so really for the last couple of years now, since that work with the Scarborough Hospital that we got the Prism Award for, I've been really intrigued by how do we make the coaching conversation more real-time and more focused. And that to me is the beauty behind sprints and hacks. So if you love reading, check out the web. Again, this is an area that is iterating so quickly. You can purchase a book, but the book will already be out of date by the time it comes to print. The book that I've been reading this fall on sprints is literally called Sprint. And it talks again about one of Google's labs and how they went through a sprint process in rapid prototyping is what it's called. So when you're working in very complex environments, rapid change environments, this is where a sprint and a hack comes into play. And I think for myself, the real interesting spot is because that is the area I always led in. So how do we create environments where, and learning processes which mirror the pace at which we're moving? Now, on the flip side, on one side, we have the speed of the hack and the sprint. On the flip side, we also have the pause. And many of you know that a few years ago, I launched the Conversation Sparker cards in English. One of my projects this year has been working with a wonderful coach in Quebec to translate it to French. And so these cards were launched in late summer, early fall of this year. These are some of the question cards that are in the overall deck of 70 plus cards. And why I wanted to include the pause here is because I think we will see continued need in 2017 for pauses of all kinds. Pauses in a world which is ever loud and ever just ever fast moving. I think as coaches, we do create a very important pause point, even if it's microseconds, for people to stop, notice, be intentional, make some decisions, and then keep moving. So my hope is for all of you listening into the call today to think about how you're creating pause in your work. And I think that goes along with just different deep dives with different tools. There is so much that is happening in the space of learning today. I think, again, I've been talking about this for many years, but, the whole learning environment has changed so dramatically. I get really excited when I get to do work with organizations on, bringing their training processes into the new millennia. And a lot of that is in the virtual millennia. So one of the other projects I've been involved with so much this year has been virtualizing programming. And in part of that, we're bringing in and getting away from the typical things, like how do you use emojis to discuss emotion rather than words? And this is where in our work as a coach, we are such a lingual channel. It's all about the verbal. As an experiential educator, and those are my roots, I'm always thinking about how do we access wisdom in the different channels. So one of the things I've had a lot of fun sort of playing with this year, not in my coaching hat, but in my virtual trainer's hat, has been seeing how emojis have been used in the webinars and webcasts that I lead at the corporate level. So some of you may know that, in addition to my own work, I go in and I work with organizations to help their teams, often it's learning team, leadership teams, create more effective and engaging virtual conversations. And earlier this year, actually it was about a year and a half ago, I had a group across the continent. We were limited for time, but I really felt that it was important to hear from everyone as to what they were leaving the call with. As you know, I sort of have this, I want to hear from everyone. So I realized we had totally run out of time. We had people in 4 time zones because, in fact, here in Canada, Newfoundland is half an hour ahead of Atlantic. So in Canada, we actually have 5 time zones. But we had people from 4 time zones, and we had to really get off the line. And I was nanosecond in my brain thinking, how do I get some feedback loops happening before we lose everyone? And I thought, emojis. Okay, let's get them to just click on the emoji that represents their, what they're leaving the call with. We, of course, were on WebEx, if you're wondering what platform we were using. So WebEx has the ability for people to select an emoji and say, hey, I'm wow, I'm excited or whatever. But emojis can be a great way. Interestingly enough, this year, or maybe it was done before, but there's an emoji card deck available now at coachingtoys.com. And for those of you that are always looking for cool different things to do, that's a resource you may want to check out. The terms that you see here are from this book that is emerging. So Dee Dee and others might just be tuning in, but I've been working this fall on a new book that will come out in 2017, really about the virtual learning space. And so just notice in this quick word screen, you know, in a virtual space, we've got everything from the round robins, going around the table, through to using the traditional things like debriefs and chats, but also bringing in some additional things, the emojis, you know, leveraging breakouts. I think a lot of virtual trainers these days are still scared to use breakouts. And certainly in my virtual train the training, that was a theme I was hearing all year. As coaches, as trainers, we want to think about how do our biases create and shape the work that we're doing. So my hope is in this next year, you'll pick one area that you want to reach outside of your comfort zone on. 2 years ago, I really did this for myself when I was tasked to create an e-learning component of the coaching and mentoring skills training that we won the PRISM Award for. So as I was saying at the start of the call, you know, in 2015, so much of my work was focused on helping these 120 leaders develop better coaching and mentoring skills. And in the hospital setting, they were still recruiting. Like, there's a lot of always turnover. So new leaders were coming on board. And the organizers of the program said, we need a way to be sort of bringing you back in, Jen, without doing that every time we hire someone. And so we came up with this idea in the spring of 2015 that, you know, the best approach would be to try an e-learning component. And for anyone who's familiar with e-learning, like, it's a whole other skill set that you learn from. It's not also always the best platform for looking at complex issues. So what I was needing to do was take what we were doing in the classroom with all the practice and feedback loops and think about how could we model that in a virtual environment. And as the programming evolved into what would ultimately become, you know, a 8 meta module, 4-hour training program, it became very apparent we had to leverage the scenarios and do that through animation. So it was a work, you know, it's an award-winning work now, but it was really exciting to be working with some e-learning specialists on that project 2 years ago. As I think of where we're going in 2017, I think animation is also going to be a great vehicle for modeling. Modeling, you know, what is good, modeling what is not working well in a way that isn't so viscerally like related to people. I think so many issues today have so much heat, but we want people to learn and challenge themselves in a way where they're safer, and also in a way that where it's more I would say respectful, perhaps. So I'm looking at, in some of my work, to sort of take out some of the heat, move it from just like people into moving it into animation. It's not to say that's going to work or it's going to be the best way, but it's one thing that I'm really thinking about. So for you, deep dives with different tools, what might that mean for you in the new year? And I just have a few more slides before we go to wrap up. I also wanted to share sort of my top 5 for 2016. About a month ago, I was running a program here in Toronto, and one of the attendees said, I really wanted to come and join you, Jen, because you're so good with the different, you know, exercises and activities. So I thought it might be neat to share sort of my top 5 tools for this year, because many of you are practitioners, you're looking to amp up your game. No surprise, number 1 is Zoom. And as I said at the start of the call, it's been really great to move so many of the calls, so many of my groups over to this virtual space. 85% of my groups are now here in Zoom. There's still 15% that aren't. And I just continue to notice a couple of layers when I'm moving between phone and Zoom. 1, what's the level of connection amongst the group? And how fast does that form? And 2, there's a different kind of energy. So it's taken me a while to sort of really get comfortable with knowing I'm streaming all the time. And so like just coming up with a fashion that works well. Something too, you'll notice maybe that I've been standing throughout this call because today is Friday. And if any of you have worked with me on a Friday, you know that this is like my most popular day of calls. I literally go from about 6 a.m. and today it's literally until 6 p.m. when I'm on a series of just different coaching calls, different virtual presentations. So practically, I've had to come up with some ways to get out of the chair because you need to move. If we're sitting all the time, that's not healthy as well. And so even within my office, I'll be in different Zoom spots for the course of the day, just to keep it a little exciting for me. And hopefully for my clients, because of course, my presence is going to impact their experience. So that's Zoom. Hacks and sprints I mentioned as well. If you get an opportunity to do more research on that, I think you might be interested to explore what that might mean for your business. And I think, just keeping it really simple, I put it in the top 5 category because it really is about finding those real-time supports that work for different clients, whether it's the deep connection of an intensive day of work together. And what I've found this year is more and more people are engaging me for like a 1 or a 2-day engagement. We may spend the whole day working virtually. I've also had people come up and join me here in Canada. And next year, I'm going to be traveling a little bit more. In May, I'm going to be on the east coast of Canada. I'm also going to be doing some work with the ICF Pittsburgh chapter. So, if you want to do some deep connection, deep work together around group and team programming, I'd be more than happy to book a day off with you and work side by side. I think, as I said earlier, people are into and wanting these focused and individualized experiences, whether it's also in a group or a team. 4th tool, metaphors. And some of you have been with me this year as I pulled out the miniature metaphor. Wonderful tool that's available to you at coachingtoys.com. I still don't know who the creator of that tool is, but it's an amazing tool, miniature metaphor. And I use it all the time. I'd like to thank them because it's really changes the conversations I'm in. And my final top 5, of course, is vision cards. As many of you know, last year, 2015, I launched the 40 Ways to Work with Visual Cards. And that has been an amazing sort of like hot seller on the potentialsrealized.com website. It's facilitated instructions to 40 ways of working with visual cards, whether you're working on change, whether you're working on innovation, whether you're working on visioning, values, etc. So check that out if it's of use. And I wanted to give everyone just a moment to sort of, as we go to wrap up this call, think about where you want to be in 2017. And for a nanosecond, to invite you to write down a few words about where you want to be a year from now. Imagine that it's December 31st, 2017, and you're looking back out on the year. Take a note or two around what your successes have been, what's been happening in your world, or what your focus has been. Creating a powerful vision is something we do all the time with our clients. And I know when I meet with coaches, it's not something that we prioritize. So I'm going to be silent for a couple of minutes here. And I just invite you to quickly grab a pen and a piece of paper. And even if it's just a headline of what you want your 2017 to look like, be like, take a moment to do that now. And when the minute or two is over, I'll jump in with our last couple of slides. So that's about 2 minutes. Again, it's a nano break. I'm hoping there might be some words that have come up for each one of you as you've been listening. Having those taglines, having those themes can be really powerful and impactful. And if something came up for you in this last few minutes, just make a note of it and maybe put it somewhere visible on your desk. As I spoke about earlier, I was amazed with the vision, sprint I did last month with some people at the Learning Lab and Design Studio, and how much clarity came through from just a couple of minutes of bursts of silence and writing. One final tool I want to leave you with before we wrap up this 13th annual year-end programs call is just a reminder of the importance of a plan. Now, we don't always work with people who are planners, and part of the work that we do as coaches, I think, is to help people keep things visible. So almost every program I've been running this year, whether it's been group coaching essentials, whether it's been leadership training with people, whether it's been working with national learning teams or healthcare providers, bringing it back to this one-page notion. You know, what's the one page or the one thing? How do we keep this work visible? How do we keep it top of mind in today's ever frenetic world? So a reminder, or maybe an invitation, as you go towards the end of the year, what's the one-page plan you want to create for 2017? As we saw today, a couple of possibilities. I think other things that are on the horizon, continued embracing of this video streaming. It is amazing to just bring people together. We do have a continued need for research and education, and I'll invite you to stay tuned at the Effective Group Coaching Facebook page. About once a month, I'm getting outreach from different researchers, people who are wanting to invite coaches and their clients to participate in research. So we actually have some empirical data, and I will continue to put calls out by researchers on the Facebook page and also at our newsletter. If you haven't signed up for the newsletter, you can access that through groupcoachingessentials.com. With our Privacy Act, I unfortunately cannot add you to the list, but I'd invite you to add yourself to the list for the monthly newsletter, because it's not just, you know, here's what's upcoming, it's also useful resources for you as practitioners. In 2017, my hope is that we will continue to have safe, respectful places for deep conversation, because we really do need to be having those deeper dialogues as we move forward in the world. Some of the interesting resources that I've mentioned today that I hope you'll check out. Earlier this week or last week, there was a new white paper on team coaching released by the Worldwide Association of Business Coaches. It taps into a couple of books. It doesn't tap into my writing, but it taps into a couple of other great books on team coaching. Also, I mentioned today the Columbia University October presentation of thought leaders on team coaching podcasting. Please check that one out. And one resource I don't think I've mentioned this year at all, but it's a fun little design tool which is known as Trello. It's a very visual way to be bringing design work to play. And I've been doing a lot more in the space of design thinking. Some of you might already be doing work there, but I've been working with a couple of startups and smaller firms that are designers. And it's been getting me to think differently about how even I'm designing my programming, etc. So 2017 programming, I always want to put a little plug in what's upcoming. Continued programming is going to be continuing. Mentor coaching group, if you're renewing your ACC or applying for ACC, PCC at the first time, we're back Friday, January 13th at 9 and 12 noon, and that'll run for 3 months till April. The Group Coaching Essentials teleseminar, which gives you a lot of tips, tools, and ideas in a 5-week format for group coaching and all things group coaching. That's Fridays at 10:30 to 11:45 a.m. Eastern, also starting January 13th. So you can get an idea of what my Fridays really look like. Popular day for coaches. Friday afternoons, I run the Advanced Group and Team Coaching Practicum, and that program is approved for 10 CCEs, Continuing Coach Education, with ICF. Where the Essentials runs about 8 to 12 times a year, the Advanced Group and Team Coaching Practicum only runs 4 times a year. So we will start in January 13th, and it will run through to March. It'll start again in April. I'll do a summer session and a fall session. So just to flag that, because a lot of coaches think that I run that all year. I only run it 4 times a year. And we are back next year for another year of Learning Lab and Design Studio, which is one of my favorite entities. We meet on Friday mornings at 8 a.m. Eastern. Next year, we're only going to be meeting twice a month. So it's going to be a little bit of a different format. Twice a month, lecture call, facilitation lab, and some spot coaching. The nice thing about it is I'm bringing the price down. So if anyone wants sort of a group experience focusing on groups, teams, coaching, and business development, check out the learninglabandDesignstudio.com. And our newest program is called Virtual Facilitation Essentials. Some of you have joined me in the past for the 2-day or 15-hour virtual facilitation intensive. It's all about creating engaging and effective virtual learning, whether it's coaching, training, facilitating. And that program will be starting in February 9th on Thursday afternoon. So I hope that you've had fun. 2 more upcoming supports before the end of the year. I am doing a series of virtual retreats this month. The last one will happen next week, Friday. If you want some focused planning and action on your business, join me for $97 for half of the day on Friday, December 16th from 9:30 to 1:30. You have the choice. You can focus on business development or you can focus on program development. I have 2 separate streams and you'll be joining me every hour as you move through those processes. And finally, for those that are more into the on-demand individualized learning, I pulled together a special called the 2017 Kickstart Your Coaching Business, which are 3 of our most popular on-demand courses: the Coaching Business Builder, Solopreneur Primer, and a 4-hour marketing tips for your team and group programs. It's if you take it all separately, it's almost $300, but I've bundled this together for $195. And you can find out more. There's a link there, but it's www.learninglabandDesignstudio.com or bit.ly/1717 coach start. So a couple different resources. Stay connected. I love doing these calls. Increasingly, I get so many more emails after the video. So I'd love to hear what you enjoyed today. Email me at info@potentialsrealized.com. Comment over at Effective Group Coaching at Facebook. And certainly check us out. I hope maybe you'll join me live next year in our 2017 Learning Lab and Design Studio. We meet twice a month, Friday mornings, 8 to 8:45 a.m., and it's really a blast. So I want to say thanks for joining me today. Dee Dee, if you want to say a word before you head on out, it's been great to have you here, and want to thank everyone for spending some time with me as we move into the holiday season. All right, well, I'm going to stop our recording, and I'll say so long for now. I will see you in the new year.